Welcome to AK Anime Explainer. Today is explanation of Soul Land 3, Legend of the Dragon King Part 272. Without any delay, start explanation. Both parties stood facing each other, separated by a great distance. Immediately, an intense, almost palpable lust for battle seemed to be bursting out from their saber and spear. In Sima Jinqi's view, Tang Wulin was just like a giant dragon that lay dormant, but could possibly burst out at any time. On the other hand, Sima Jinkai was an executioner whose savage energy was plain to see in Tang Wulin's eyes. This was still the first time he had ever met a soul master whose martial soul was not affected by his Golden Dragon King bloodline. Under normal circumstances, even if the opponent's martial soul was not a dragon type, they would still be slightly affected by his bloodline's aura. It was inevitable. However, that did not happen this time. The savage energy exuded from the dragon-slaying saber could even make the giant dragon cry tears of sadness. Not only was Tang Wulin's Golden Dragon King bloodline incapable of affecting the opponent, he felt like he was the one being affected to a certain degree. Initially, Tang Wulin thought that since the opponent was a saber that slew dragons, his bloodline would certainly get enlivened by their presence and maybe even infuriated. Yet, when he actually faced Sima Jinkai and sensed the aura emitted from his opponent's body, he realized that this was not the case. The dragon-slaying saber did trigger a response from his Golden Dragon King bloodline, but it was not negative emotions such as rage or hatred. On the contrary, it was a feeling akin to respect. It was the feeling of approval. As the Dragon Clan's leader, the Golden Dragon King was a part of the Dragon God. How could the Golden Dragon King react in such a manner when it was facing a dragon-slaying saber? What was going on here? However, Tang Wulin could tell that the dragon-slaying saber in the opponent's hand undoubtedly had a close connection to the Dragon Clan. Sima Jinqi's was even more surprised than Tang Wulin. Tang Wulin's Golden Dragon King bloodline was a martial soul in Sima Jinqi's view, and he had never seen before a dragon-type martial soul owner capable of acting so calmly before him. The dragon-slaying saber was not a saber that slew dragons, in fact. In reality, it was a weapon created by Dragon God for the purpose of being given to the Dragon God's most trusted subordinate. Out of the 9 great Dragon Kings, the Light Dragon King was the Dragon God's favorite. Thus, the dragon-slaying saber was given to the Light Dragon King. The Light Dragon King was in charge of penalties and punishments within the Dragon Clan. Hence, the dragon-slaying saber was actually used to behead felonious dragons and not for slaughtering all of them. The Dragon Clan was defeated during the Great War of the Divine Realm, which resulted in the downfall of the Light Dragon King. The dragon-slaying saber also vanished from the Divine Realm soon after and dropped onto the Dolor continent. As a divine weapon, it was silenced for many years before it transformed into an energy form and remained dormant in a corner of the continent for years. One day, an upright and outspoken human sacrificed himself in order to maintain order when he was confronted by a formidable enemy. The dragon-slaying saber was awakened from its deep sleep and fused into the man's bloodline to resurrect him. From that point onward, the dragon-slaying saber martial soul was passed down through the bloodline, like an heirloom, only having one owner at a time. This was because there could only be one dragon-slaying saber. What a waste that there was no more Dragon Clan for it to supervise anymore. Sima Jinkai was the current successor of the dragon-slaying saber martial soul. Every single inheritor of the dragon-slaying saber was an unyielding and honorable person who could not tolerate injustice. The dragon-slaying saber was genuinely one of the most powerful weapons of its generation too. Tang Wulin inherited the Golden Dragon King bloodline and became a part of the Dragon God, so of course, he would not yield to the dragon-slaying saber easily. However, Tang Wulin had a reverent feeling toward the Dragon Clan's sense of justice brought by the dragon-slaying saber. This was the reason why Tang Wulin felt such a peculiar feeling in his heart earlier. The referee took a look at both parties, but he did not speak anymore before he announced the start of the match. This match would be the greatest collision since the competition began. The Blood God Army, the Southern Army Corps, the Shrek 7 monsters paid, and the majority of the people watching Soul screens all over the Federation paid close attention to this contest between two elite powerhouses. Tang Wulin and Sima Jinkai had yet to attack each other, but they raised their weapons almost simultaneously. Tang Wulin held the golden dragon spear in his hand as a dash of gold appeared on every inch of him. A pair of golden dragon wings spread out behind his back. Soon after, speckles of golden radiance were glowing all over his body as his two-word battle armor, Dragon Moon, attached to him. His figure instantly grew to a height of 3 meters as his golden dragon spear swelled as well. A powerful and intense spear's consciousness rippled and spread out from the tip of the spear. The aura of Tang Wulin's entire person increased exponentially as well. Dragon's roars like thunder burst out from his body as diamond-shaped golden dragon scales shimmered with dazzling radiance and piercing bright light. Tang Wulin shifted his gaze and let out a loud roar into the sky. He raised a golden dragon spear in his hand high into the air as his dragon's roar suddenly became louder. The dragon wings on his back spread open and lifted his body off the ground. His aura was continued to grow rapidly, without stopping. Sima Jinkai on the opposite side held the enormous dragon-slaying saber in his right hand horizontally across the side of his body. Soul rings arose from beneath his feet, revealing 4 purple and 4 black rings. His aura was also increasing similarly as if a puff of dark cloud spread out from his side. The surrounding space seemed to be shaking mildly as if it was unable to withstand the terrifying pressure. The very air appeared to be cracking. A layer of black mist covered the dragon-slaying saber. The mournful cries of the dragon clan were heard echoing from the saber. The dragon-slaying saber was still the saber of justice. It was honorable and righteous, glorious and conscientious. The dragons crying sorrowfully were the souls of those from the dragon clan that committed heavy crimes. These dragon clan's dragon souls were suppressed by the sharpness of the saber for countless years. Every time the dragon-slaying saber was used, the sound it made would exercise great influence over the people of ill intent such that their mental state would be affected. What a waste that the effect was useless against Tang Wulin. His heart was righteous, so on the contrary, the agonizing scream was actually pleasing to his ears. In the eyes of the audience, both of them seemed to have already turned into mountains, one black while the other was golden. Both were still soaring valiantly such that the space across the entire competition stage was shaking mildly. Meanwhile, in the Blood God Battalion, it said that the Star Do battle network is incapable of withstanding battles of 3-word battle armor and above, hence the restriction. I'm afraid that this match between these two will already exceed that. I wonder if the Star Do cabin and the Star Do battle network are capable of withstanding it. Zhong Huanyun frowned deeply. Cao Deji spoke, I'm sure that the system has been reinforced. A similar situation has already happened in the competition earlier. The Federation will certainly reinforce the battlefield on a large scale for the final few rounds of the competition. It's a little difficult to comment on the Star Do cabin, though. We'll see. Zhong Huanyun said, the Star Do battle network is genuinely a masterpiece of modern technology, but there's still a long way to go before it can truly become a part of our lives. This year's competition appears advanced, but in reality, there are a lot of problems that arise from the battle network. I think that the system will enter its research and development phase once again after the competition has ended. I wonder when they will release a better version. There are still too many things to improve on, whether it's the hardware or the system. Cao Deji agreed and said, it is so. However, the Star Do battle network's appearance is already astonishing enough for old people like us. We shall wait and see then. In fact, it will not be long before the Federation's technological development arrives at a bottleneck. The Federation invests even more energy into the quest of searching in outer space due to the deficiency of resources. It's only possible for the Federation to continue to sustain itself after it has found brand new planets with sufficient resources. Zhong Huanyun heaved a sigh. But these people are not thinking like that. In their perception, there's still quite a lot of resources which can be exploited on the Star Luo planet. Though Spirit and Star Luo are closer targets that are much easier to seize compared to the gamble of space exploration. Meanwhile, ever since Shrek Academy was destroyed, the voices calling for war are growing louder and louder. In my view, it will not take long now before it begins. Cao Deji frowned deeply. Every war happens because of someone's greed for profits. In the meantime, it's the common people who suffer. This is also the reason why I hope that the army can support Tang Wulin's efforts in future. The internal feuds between mankind are not something our blood god army should take part in regardless. Zhong Huanyun nodded. That's right. My duty is to protect mankind, not destroy it. The federal parliament is truly disappointing the people. We shall wait and see then. Regardless, our greatest enemy is still those creatures on the abyssal plane for now. Anyhow, those old officers in the army can't transfer us. The black and golden colors finally reached their peak and were wildly charging at each other on the screen. Tang Wulin's dragon wings flapped at full force behind his back. His entire body was enshrouded by a gigantic golden dragon when empowered by the golden dragon flies. He dashed at Sima Jinkai with shocking speed while the golden dragon spear acted as his golden dragon's fang. Sima Jinkai also leaped into the sky on the opposite side. His terrifying saber's consciousness was surrounded by the dragon clan's corpses and bones in the shadows. It radiated spiritual waves of desolation, pain, regret and hatred as it swept toward Tang Wulin. That was the half-step spirit domain. Almost instantly, Tang Wulin understood that not only was Sima Jinchi's cultivation base powerful, but his spiritual power had also achieved the state of half-step spirit domain. It allowed his spiritual power to combine with his martial soul and produce the domain form which could only be unleashed by a three-word battle armor master. In reality, how could a domain attached to battle armor ever compare to the domain that was mastered by the soul master himself? The golden dragon conjured by Tang Wulin was akin to a flying moth that darted into the fire as he dashed into the darkness. The surrounding temperature dropped abruptly as all the mournful wailing turned into hoarse and exhausted screaming in a split second. A stream of intense radiance suddenly illuminated the shadows as it exterminated all the darkness like the birth of a bright new world. The terrifying spear's radiance burst out wildly. The golden dragon spear raged as a valiant dragon's roar burst out from Tang Wulin's body. It was the golden dragon roar. All the sad cries and agonizing screams halted immediately at the sound of the golden dragon roar. It was as if they had encountered something unbelievable. Then, the saber's radiance and spear's radiance collided with one another. Boom, boom, boom. Explosive thunder seemed to have erupted in the sky. The black and gold colors were extinguished at the moment of impact, revealing the silhouettes of Tang Wulin and Sima Jinkai clad in heavy armor. Both of them were a stone's throw away from each other. The tip of Tang Wulin's spear touched on the edge of Sima Jinchi's saber. An awesome shockwave of energy burst out from the center of the collision in a split second and exploded. The figures of both Tang Wulin and Sima Jinkai were seen blasted away and flung backward, the distance between them growing farther in that one moment. Tang Wulin's golden dragon spear and Sima Jinchi's dragon-slaying saber both gave out a deep buzzing tone. The dragon-slaying saber was supposed to unleash cries of sorrow, yet the sound of sadness turned into cheering-like emotions after the collision with the golden dragon spear. The buzzing sound was crystal clear. On the other hand, the golden dragon spear's buzzing tone sounded deep and heavy, complementing the dragon-slaying saber's sound. They were calling out at each other just like old friends meeting after being apart for many years. It was only one collision and both Tang Wulin and Sima Jinkai were rather shocked because they could clearly sense that the opponent's aura put them at ease. Sima Jinkai especially had a very clear feeling after the dragon-slaying saber and the golden dragon spear made contact. The force of the impact aside, his soul power began to surge violently and elevated by a huge amount due to stimulation of the golden dragon spear. The dragon-slaying saber produced a feeling of one with the saber that he had never felt before. He seemed to have already turned into the saber as jubilant emotions spread in his heart. What was happening? Could it be that his martial soul was a dragon of justice? Even so, the dragon-slaying saber should not be feeling so joyous. They both wanted to see what would happen when the two of them clashed, but the feelings that arose from the collision was completely different from what they had imagined. They felt that their blood essences were surging from the tremor, yet other than that, the golden dragon spear gave a jubilant and friendly feeling to Tang Wulin as if it had encountered a fellow like-minded friend, like meeting a long-lost companion. The dragon-slaying saber brought an even more intense feeling to Sima Jinkai. It would only be a slight exaggeration to say it even felt a little like meeting someone dear after a long time. It was as if he had encountered a family member, an elderly relative. What was happening here? Both of them landed in the distance, but neither launched another attack immediately. They gazed into each other in the distance as they felt a change of surprise and bewilderment in their hearts. The weapons in their hands were capable of suppressing an opponent's martial soul under ordinary circumstances. Yet, the feelings they had now were unprecedented. What did this signify? Was this not thought-provoking for them? However, they were still on the battlefield. They were still engaged in a great contest to strive for the finals, so how could they find time for deep ponderings? Tang Wulin took a deep breath as he pointed the golden dragon spear forward. In a split second, he was one with the spear as the incomparably sharp spear's consciousness shot out like lightning to Sima Jinkai in the distance. Sima Jinkai held the dragon-slaying saber across his body. The blade of the dragon-slaying saber pointed up as cloud patterns in the form of giant dismembered dragons emerged. A powerful saber's consciousness blotted out the sky and land. If his saber's consciousness was described as a tempestuous storm, then the golden dragon spear in Tang Wulin's hand was like a proud ship that cleaved through the waves. None of them managed to have a clear advantage in this. Roar! A valiant dragon's roar rippled around Tang Wulin's body. His dragon moon battle armor glowed brightly as the dragon core and soul core in his body pulsated simultaneously. Streams of the blue-silver emperor's shadows appeared faintly on the surface of his armor. Vines of the blue-silver emperor wound around the golden dragon spear. During the first collision, Tang Wulin could clearly feel that his ability made him an unworthy opponent against Sima Jinkai in the battle of brute strength. He could only rely on his blood-soul fusion skill in order to fight it out. Moreover, he would need to suppress the opponent to the best of his abilities so the opponent was rendered incapable of completely unleashing his saber soul. In the next moment, Tang Wulin moved. He touched the tips of his toes gently against the ground as his silhouette began to shimmer once again. The dragon wings on his back seemed to have suddenly enlarged as he flapped strenuously. In the next moment, he had transformed himself into the spear and moved at lightning speed as he charged straight at the Gale Saber demon Sima Jinkai. Sima Jinkai roared in rage as the soul rings on his body shimmered with light. Swinging the dragon-slaying saber in his hand, he conjured a massive saber of light that was accompanied by the sound of giant dragon's sad cries as he shocked the entire crowd. A giant black dragon emerged behind his back. The black dragon struggled with great effort in the air as if it was attempting to escape, but in a flash, a stream of white light swept past the sky and the black dragon's body was chopped into two halves. Resentment, hatred, regret, pain, reluctance, and all sorts of negative emotions transformed into streams of black vapor that instantly surged into the dragon-slaying saber. At once, a layer of black scale-like forms seemed to be added to the saber's light. Roar! An enormous golden dragon's head burst out from the front end of Golden Dragon Spear boldly. It gave out a raging roar at the terrifying saber's radiance. A peculiar scene appeared. The black scales on the black saber's radiance that had been filled with negative emotions were melting rapidly at the sound of the furious roar. The negative emotions were swiftly depleting and there was even a feeling of vindication. The golden dragon swayed its body and charged out of the golden dragon spear. The golden dragon spear fused with the dragon, which resulted in a faint blue hue appearing on the enormous golden dragon's scales. Thick and intense life source attached to its body as if it had truly become alive. That was Tang Wulin's blood-soul fusion skill, the Blue Emperor Dragon soars to the heaven. After his cultivation, all these days accompanied by his complete control over his cultivation base, Tang Wulin's control over the Golden Dragon King bloodline and his understanding of his blood-soul fusion skill had already advanced by another level. The Blue-Silver Emperor's infusion increased the energy emitted from his Golden Dragon soars to the heaven and added a portion of vitality to the soul skill. This was what made it so powerful. Boom! The Black Dragon slays and the Blue Emperor Dragon soars to the heaven collided into one another loudly. Before everyone's eyes, the signs of disintegration began to appear on the ever-domineering dragon-slaying saber instantly before everyone's eyes. The saber's radiance dimmed before it began to break down on a large scale. At the exact moment when the golden radiance and black radiance coincided, the audience witnessed the golden dragon spear touch against the back of the dragon-slaying saber. Ding! A crisp ringing was heard. The Gale Saber demon Sima Jinch's entire body shook violently as he was blasted away by the massive force cast by the golden dragon spear like a meteor. Streams of the golden spear's consciousness surged wildly into his body, but it was also at this moment, a black soul ring rippled away from the dragon-slaying saber and engulfed the streams of spear's consciousness. Sima Jinkai felt great pain all over his body as if every inch of his skin was tearing apart. Yet, his dragon-slaying saber was radiating exceedingly joyous emotions to him as if it had acquired something amazing. All the sad cries of the giant dragons vanished, leaving behind the sounds of cheerful buzzing. What was going on? In the next moment, Sima Jinkai felt as a peculiar energy fluctuation radiating from the dragon-slaying saber burst into his body. His soul power cultivation had stopped elevating for many years, but to his surprise, it rose just a little, trembling upward. Sima Jinkai was even more surprised to find that his sea of spirit became clearer in an instant. Indeed, everything in his surroundings seemed to turn clearer. He had already achieved the spiritual cultivation base of half-step spirit domain, so it was extremely difficult even if he wished to advance by just a little. Yet, Tang Wulin's one strike managed to elevate his soul power and spiritual power along with the elevation of his dragon-slaying saber. How? How is that possible? What's happening here? Even after being blasted away, Sima Jinkai felt that the level of shock he felt in his heart at present was beyond comparison. In other words, even if he did manage to elevate in a battle, it would only affect his experience and skills, but not his soul power or spiritual power. Perhaps it would be possible to elevate his spiritual power due to external stimulation, but his soul power would never do so. What's actually going on? How did the enemy's attack dawn upon myself yet elevate my cultivation base? This was simply unbelievable and implausible. Tang Wulin watched as the black radiance from the opponent's body spread out and enshrouded him. Soon, the opponent's body was stabilized while his spear's consciousness was dissolved by the opponent. At present, he had the upper hand, so he would definitely not show his opponent any mercy. Tang Wulin launched the golden dragon flies once again. At the same time, the golden dragon spear in his hand glowed brightly as he unleashed the blue emperor soars to the heaven again. A ferocious golden dragon that was even wilder than before surged out and shot straight at the opponent. Meanwhile, the Gale Saber demon Sima Jinkai had just sprung back into action and landed on the ground when Tang Wulin's attacks reached him. His consciousness infused into the dragon-slaying saber and triggered the dragon-slaying saber's saber soul. A horrifying aura abruptly diffused out of his body. Tang Wulin felt as if he had sunk into the battlefield. His surroundings were filled with deadly silence. A gush of exuberant consciousness filled with justice and fairness descended from the sky. A giant purple dragon appeared in mid-air. It had a pair of blood-red eyes filled with evil energy. The gigantic dragon-slaying saber descended from the sky in the grasp of a huge golden hand. It slashed at the purple giant dragon, cutting it from the forehead all the way to the dragon's tail, and split its body into two halves. Agonizing screams, reluctance, and purple vapor filled the air, engulfing the whole sky. What was that? It was the Hell Evil Dragon. The name of Evil Dragon appeared in Tang Wulin's mind in a baffling manner. The Evil Dragon, as its name implied, was certainly a creature of great malice in the Dragon clan. The dragon-slaying sabers grew in size by more than tenfold after it swept past the Hell Evil Dragon's body. Dark purple blood coagulated and formed into purple striations on the blade. It descended from the sky and instantly enveloped Tang Wulin's spear's radiance and the golden dragon that had manifested from the blue emperor soars to the heaven. Before the giant saber, everything appeared minuscule, whether it was Tang Wulin himself or his blue emperor soars to the heaven. Tang Wulin finally felt how terrifying the saber soul endured by Yi Xinglan was the other day. He could not even completely see through the mysteries of the saber soul but only felt an irresistible, boundless energy. The blue emperor soars to the heaven paused for a moment. Soon after, the golden dragon spear in Tang Wulin's hand shook violently and burst forth with countless golden spears' radiance. Every stream of the golden spear's radiance was attached to a stream of blue-gold spear's radiance that complemented one another and shot forward with an indomitable will. It was the blue emperor thousand accusing fingers. This very strike was undoubtedly Tang Wulin's most powerful ever from his golden dragon spear. It was also his most powerful blood-soul fusion skill that completely merged his bloodline power, soul power, and the spear's consciousness formed from the 1,000 accusing fingers into one and transformed into his most formidable attack. Countless spears of light combined into one before hitting the saber's radiance. Buzz! The entire Saber Soul's world shook violently before disintegrating part by part. Countless golden spears of light transformed into golden dragon lightning that struck mercilessly at the purple saber's consciousness and destroyed it. The audience could only see that Gale Saber Demon Sima Jinch's sixth soul ring glowed before he thrust out the saber. The entire competition stage turned purple. The giant purple dragon seen by Tang Wulin could not be seen by the spectators. They could only see that the dragon-slaying saber suddenly enlarged by countless times and enshrouded Tang Wulin. On the other hand, the golden dragon spear in the golden dragon king's hand suddenly burst with unprecedented dazzling light, as if it had transformed into a massive golden glowing orb that bloomed outward at once. The collision between purple and gold shook the terrifying saber soul till it shattered. However, all the golden dragon lightning unleashed by the golden dragon spear was also engulfed by the purple saber soul. Sima Jinch's cultivation base had not reduced, but, in fact, it was rising steadily and seemed to have reached a whole new level. An expression of absolute joy emerged on Sima Jinch's face underneath his mask. It's real. Could my cultivation base be elevated, after not advancing for so many years? Could it be that this is the true realization of everything I felt as I entered that miraculous world when I first manifested my saber soul back in those days? Everything there was real. As this thought flashed across his mind, the dragon-slaying saber in his hand had not hesitated at all. His seventh soul ring shimmered as the dragon-slaying saber paused ever so slightly in the air. His saber's hilt began to change as pieces of golden scales emerged on it. Finally, a dazzling golden dragon claw, shimmering with a white aura, grabbed the dragon-slaying saber's hilt. Sima Jinkai disappeared. What remained was his Dragon Slayer avatar. It was his seventh soul skill and also his martial soul avatar, Dragon Slayer. That huge saber was raised once again with his shimmering sixth soul ring appearing on top of the Dragon Slayer saber. Meanwhile, the surrounding space turned a dark purple color, akin to an enormous violet vortex. It was no longer that hell-evil dragon from earlier appearing before Tang Wulin's eyes anymore, but a terrifying giant purple-black dragon, seemingly hundreds of meters in length, that could fill up the sky and land. The protruding crest line on the dragon's purple-black scales was even flickering with a faint golden hue. It was the Hell-Evil Dragon Emperor. From the moment the Hell-Evil Dragon Emperor had appeared, Tang Wulin clearly felt it seemed familiar for some reason, as if he had seen this creature before. Oh no! In his heart, Tang Wulin could immediately sense that danger was upon him. Even though the 1,000 accusing fingers had managed to break the opponent's attack, the earlier technique of slaying the evil dragon earlier turned into slaying the evil dragon emperor after the opponent unleashed his martial soul avatar. How is this the same thing? Moreover, when the golden dragon claw appeared on his hilt, it made a holy aura emerge in his formerly wild saber's consciousness. Moreover, the aura was vast and boundless, and by no means less powerful than the Holy Angel clan's martial soul. At present, Tang Wulin had no time to reflect on this. His conscious mind was completely immersed in the meditative process for his golden dragon spear. A large flower bloomed behind his back. It was the damask tulip emerging, followed by peculiar light patterns that spread out behind him. It was his sixth soul skill, the Devour Heaven and Earth. More precisely, it was supposed to be his blood-soul fusion skill known as the Blue Emperor Devour Heaven and Earth. The large flower opened up as an enormous golden shadow emerged behind the flower soon after. It was a huge golden heart. Dub-dub, dub-dub, dub-dub. The sound of the strong heartbeat echoed through the entire area. The entire audience could feel that their heartbeats were affected. It was as if their heartbeats were syncing with the sound of that golden heart's heartbeat immediately. An intense energy fluctuation burst out in the air soon after. The energy storm condensed and advanced toward the large flower. Tang Wulin raised his head and revealed his eyes, which had completely turned gold. The energy fluctuation from his body was rapidly strengthening exponentially. Even though he had yet to possess a martial soul avatar, his cultivation base was rising exponentially by relying on the amplification from his Blue Emperor devour heaven and earth that was close to martial soul fusion skill. He thrust the golden dragon spear forward and unleashed the Blue Emperor thousand accusing fingers once more. In a split second, the entire competition stage ruptured with countless rifts crisscrossing every corner of the stage. The tattered patterns, swirling and winding, raged wildly across the stage as the giant purple saber descended from the sky. There was no crashing sound, but the entire stage seemed to have collapsed at the moment. The protective, energy shield on the competition stage disintegrated as well. The audience watching the competition did not cheer aloud but gasped in surprise instead. The audience who were seated close to the stage were pulverized into powder. With the competition stage as its center, a massive light orb floated above while the terrifying explosions continued to shake and erupt over the stage. At least half of the attending audience died within seconds of the explosions. They were blasted into powder which scattered all over, akin to the heavenly maid scattering flowers amidst the booming noise. The commentator's voice halted. Such a situation was unprecedented in the history of the Star-Do Battle Network. There was no doubt that this was a catastrophic incident. The incident caused tremendous harm to the audience who had spent good money to watch the competition. They ended up losing their lives. Those people had actually paid to watch the competition. Although it was only a simulation, it was definitely not a good feeling to have to pay to experience death. There was no doubt that it was the Star-Do Battle Network's design failure, for they had overestimated the resilience of the Battle Network's competition stage. The stage was instantly destroyed in the massive collision. Why did this happen? In the Blood God Battalion, the group of Blood Gods was stunned from witnessing the scene. They had not expected to witness such a spectacular sight in the competition, much to their surprise. When Tang Wulin's heart was beating violently, Blood Nine's lips twitched involuntarily. Had the boy already grown to this extent in less than a month? Even though the Gale Saber Demon Sima Jinkai was an 8-ringed Soul Dolor at present, Blood Nine was quite sure that despite his title Dolor rank, he might still lose to Sima Jinkai in a battle. On the other hand, Tang Wulin was actually capable of fighting against Sima Jinkai and not lose. What did the damaged competition stage signify? It signified that the collision between these two people had exceeded the Battle Network's endurance limit. According to the data reported in the official announcement, the endurance limit of the Star-Do Battle Network's competition stage was equivalent to the full force attack of a 3-word battle armor master. One could only imagine the extent of the collision between Tang Wulin and Sima Jinkai earlier. The ginormous light orb lasted for half a minute before it gradually faded. The audience platform that was initially surging with the deafening, cheering sounds had turned into a heap of rubble. Those who were still alive were screaming in pain, but there was only a handful of them. It turned out the center of explosion on the competition stage had sunk more than 100 meters. Nonetheless, 2 silhouettes remained in the center. There were countless saber marks in crisscross patterns on his Dragon Moon battle armor. His hand tightly grasped the golden dragon spear which was stabbed into the ground to support his body. The Gale Saber Demon Sima Jinkai was not feeling well either. His battle armor was seriously damaged too. He held the dragon-slaying saber to prop himself up, but the aura remained surging without cessation. It was even more peculiar that a shadow could be seen vaguely behind his back. It was a white giant dragon which appeared a little blurry. Ha ha, so this is how it is. Very well, then. I've finally found it. Ha ha ha. Sima Jinkai suddenly burst out with wild laughter. On the other hand, Tang Wulin could not even utter a word at present. Have I lost? Am I going to lose after all? Tang Wulin felt a gleam of bitterness rippling through his heart. Sima Jinch's sword soul was truly too powerful. The power of Tang Wulin's 1,000 accusing fingers had already burst out to its limit, yet it seemed like Sima Jinkai was in a much better condition than he was at present. He could not figure out why the soul power fluctuation radiating from Sima Jinch's body was even more intense than before the competition began, despite being severely injured. It was utterly repugnant to common sense. Yet, it happened to Sima Jinkai just the same. Wait for me. Sima Jinkai suddenly raised his head. Only half a mask remained on his face to reveal his coarse face. He looked at Tang Wulin with a burning gaze as he mentioned 3 words to Tang Wulin. His gaze was fervent. Although Tang Wulin had a firm, persistent willpower, he felt baffled under Sima Jinchi's scrutiny. Just as he was about to speak, all of a sudden, Sima Jinchi's body turned into a radiance as he vanished from the spot. What was that? Did he disconnect himself intentionally? Did he withdraw himself from the competition? Tang Wulin looked at Sima Jinkai, who had vanished without a trace, in a daze. At the same time, he heard the electronic voice, number 33, victory. I've won. Could it be Sima Jinkai was a spent arrow earlier? That's not right. The soul power fluctuation on his body truly existed and was exuding a powerful consciousness. Even Tang Wulin felt that Sima Jinkai had some form of qualitative elevation during the battle. Tang Wulin was genuinely no match for Sima Jinkai after the elevation. Yet, he gave up the competition. He surrendered for this round and subsequently relinquished the top 2 ranks of this year's competition. Tang Wulin had never won in such a manner before, particularly a competition in which he had no idea how he won. All of a sudden, the expression on his face became peculiar. He had planned to spare no effort in fighting initially. In any case, he did not expect to win in such a manner. In the Blood God Battalion, Blood One witnessed the scene in bewilderment. Although he demanded that Tang Wulin become the champion, actually, he did not truly wish for it to be true. It was apparent that Tang Wulin had lost in this competition, but he lost it in a commendable manner. Sima Jinkai had an awe-inspiring reputation and Blood One understood this very well. This person was once considered the number 1 valiant soldier of the Southern Army Corps. Regardless of the type of battlefield, Sima Jinkai only braced himself with his saber for he despised modern technology. Even so, very few people were capable of defeating him. However, why did Sima Jinkai admit defeat in this case? Blood One sources told him that Sima Jinkai was a highly competitive man. In the Southern Army Corps, Sima Jinkai was feared by everyone. There was utterly no one who was willing to work with him, for his greatest enjoyment was to just fight. Why then did this person who had the upper hand choose to admit defeat? The communication system of the competition was broken. Sima Jinchi's final words to Tang Wulin was heard by Wulin alone. Anyhow, the result of the competition was announced. Victory to the Golden Dragon King. He had entered the finals. He had truly won. In the Southern Army Corps. Xu Xiaoyan watched the screen before her. Surprisingly, the captain managed to defeat the Gale Saber Demon. She was in the Southern Army Corps, so she understood a person's behavior in the army very well. Even the generals would take a detour when they saw this person. He had no friends nor family, only his dragon-slaying saber. He spent every day doing nothing but cultivating. He had the military rank of a senior colonel pinned on his shoulders. Yet, in reality, he did not even have a single subordinate. Thus, his military ranks were purely for display. However, he would be the Southern Army Corps trump card whenever the Grand Army Warrior competition was held. With the Gale Saber Demon, the army was always triumphant. Below the rank of a title d'honneur, he was a man without peer. His odds were ranked second and not first in this year's Federal Star Do Battle Network Challenge because the person who was ranked first was truly extraordinary. However, the person ranked first was not a worthy opponent of Sima Jinkai based on their fighting capacities. Yet, he had lost. He had lost to the captain of the Shrek 7 monsters. He was twice as old as Tang Wulin. Nevertheless, he lost. Xu Xiaoyan took a deep breath. She felt a gush of warm blood surging in her chest. At this moment, she realized why Yu Jingyu made up his mind to withstand the pain of the holy baptism. Has our captain grown to that extent? If we don't quicken our pace to catch up, I'm afraid we'll truly be left behind. No, I can't rest easy anymore. I'll need to become more powerful as well so I won't hamper my comrade's abilities. Xu Xiaoyan stood up abruptly. At this very moment, her gaze turned determined. She thought of a place which would be most suitable for her cultivation. The place was not located in the southern region. It's time for me to leave. Zhengyu, wait for my return. The huge room was decorated splendidly in gold and jade, but the decoration made the place feel ancient. It was the precipitation of time and the true secret of nobility. The inner secrets were certainly not something that could be formed within a day. They were the fruits from the accumulation of countless generations of seniors. That was how the inner secrets came to be. Behind the huge office desk sat an old man. Although his hair and mustache appeared white, his back was still as straight as a rod. On his shoulders shone 3 dazzling stars of a general, a federal general. On the wall behind him hung a large painting. The painting depicted a man covered in golden armor from head to toe. The man wielded a huge sword, and 3 pairs of clean, white wings extended behind him. Every feather was drawn with absolute attention to detail, and they appeared real. The man who sat behind the desk engaged in his tasks was the Southern Army Corps Army Commander, the Holy Angel Clan's current clan elder. He held a high position and great powers in the entire Federation. He was the Holy Angel Doluo Yu Xing'an. Yu Xing'an had controlled the Southern Army Corps for more than 40 years. The Southern Army Corps was like a piece of iron. In a certain sense, it could be regarded as a special force among the federal armies. The Southern Army Corps itself had the support of many great clans, be it in terms of manpower or financial resources. That was the reason the Southern Army Corps depended the least on the army among all the Army Corps. It was also difficult for the army to assign any personnel to the Southern Army Corps because they would face retaliation from the great Southern clans. In the whole of the Doluo Federation, the Southern region adhered to tradition the most. In terms of technological advancement, they were not as advanced as the Central region nor the Western region. However, they were the strongest in financial power. In the federal parliament, the great Southern clans and various political aristocratic families had more than 1/5 of the seats. On the Federation's side, they had attempted to wrest control of the Southern Army Corps more than once. However, they did not succeed because nobody dared to go against the Southern conservative wing. They were a force to be reckoned with in the parliament. In other words, these great clans also needed the support of an army behind them. That was the reason behind the Southern Army Corps' rich inner secrets. Even the army could not do anything about them. The leader of the Southern Army Corps had always been someone from the Holy Angel clan. The primary reason was because the Holy Angel clan was the strongest among all the traditional clans. Almost every generation of the Holy Angel clan produced a hyper-Doluo or even a higher-rank Doluo. A hyper-Doluo with the Holy Angel martial soul was more powerful than the ordinary Holy Angel Doluo. Furthermore, the Holy Angel clan had produced a limit Doluo before. The other reason being the Holy Angel clan's impartiality. They had always been fair and just to everyone. It was dictated by their martial soul. If they did not measure up, they would not be able to cultivate the Holy Angel martial soul to a higher level. Over the 4 decades since Yu Xing'an gained control of the Southern Army Corps, he strived to build a strong army. He reduced the number of soldiers but greatly improved their individual strengths. The combat strength of the Southern Army Corps was formidable. They were well equipped and were not inferior to the Central Army Corps, which was under the Battle God Hall's jurisdiction. However, these great Southern clans were not an unruly bunch. With the existence of the Southern Army Corps, the disciples of these great clans would only enlist in the Southern Army Corps. They did not spread their influence to other places. It was how the balance was maintained between them and the parliament. Reporting, came a loud voice from outside the door. The edge of Yu Xing'an's lips twitched. He did not have to ask to know who it was. There was only one person who dared shout, reporting, with such a loud voice at his door. "Come in." The door opened, and a majestic figure appeared in his office. This person walked with a majestic gait and reached Yu Zhengyu's desk in a few steps. He stood still and did a military salute. "General." Yu Xing'an lifted his head and looked at the person before him. He could not help but flash a helpless expression. The person was a senior colonel with 2 bars and 4 stars on his shoulders. He was more than 210 centimeters in height. His shoulders were extremely broad, and he resembled a mountain as he stood there. His facial features were rough and wild but were resolute at the same time. There seemed to be flames dancing in his eyes. If ever there was an apt description, he would be considered savage. At least, it was the case in the Southern Army Corps. "Jinkai, has the competition ended? Are you in the finals?" asked Yu Xing'an. Regarding Sima Jinkai, Yu Xing'an was also at a loss. With Sima Jinchi's abilities, he was supposed to be a general long ago. However, this person was not made out to be an officer. He had undergone the most transfers in the Southern Army Corps. From his initial post as the commander of the Imperial Guard to the posts of instructing officer, division commander, and others, he seemed to shirk every given responsibility. The reasons were simple. This person was a martial fanatic who knew not how to restrain himself. It was common for him to injure someone. As was the case, the high-ranking officials in the Southern Army Corps were mostly from the great Southern clans. Hence, the reports against him were relentless. Yu Xing'an admired his valor. No one knew the blame he had to shoulder for his sake. After the Star-Do Battle Network simulation system was established, the ones who were most excited about it were none other than the warriors from the Southern Army Corps. Finally, there was a venue for the Gale Saber Demon to indulge his passion for battle. They could finally be free from his harassment. As expected, Sima Jinkai had made his way to the semifinals in the competition. For a time, the Southern Army Corps cheered for him. In truth, Sima Jinkai had contributed many merits to the Army Corps. However, his faults were more than his contributions. Under heavy opposition, he did not become a general. He ended up being a senior colonel, but he did not wield any influence at all. "No, I lost," said Sima Jinkai. Yu Xing'an's brows were raised. He could not help but show shock on his face. "You lost? Who beat you?" Sima Jinkai found it difficult to hide his excitement. "It's Zhengyu's captain. General, I want to go look for him. I've finally found the person that I've been looking for all this time. The purpose of my visit today is to bid you farewell." "The person that you've been looking for? You're saying?" Yu Xing'an's eyes beamed, but he could barely hide the shock he felt inwardly. Nobody knew Sima Jinkai as well as he did. Sima Jinkai was already a rank 89 soldat. Besides, he had been at rank 89 for almost 10 years now. He was 39 years old today, but he already possessed the strength to become a title dolor when he was 29. With his natural talents, there was no reason why he was not already a title dolor. Anyway, after his soul power was raised to rank 89, he made no further improvements. It was the reason Sima Jinkai cultivated and fought with a frenzy. He had hoped to find an opportunity to achieve a breakthrough in battle. Unfortunately, things did not proceed as he had wished. Throughout the past decade, he was unable to find a breakthrough no matter how hard he worked. It was only after his saber soul was awakened that he experienced intriguing events in his spiritual world. These events seemed to be guiding him onward. Yu Xing'an knew very well that Sima Jinchi's dragon-slaying saber martial soul was definitely not inferior to the holy angel martial soul in terms of its quality. Moreover, under the diligent cultivation of this martial fanatic, he even awakened his saber soul. Once he attained the rank of a title dolor, his strength would definitely improve by leaps and bounds. The possibilities for his future would be endless. Currently, when Sima Jinkai said that he had found the person whom he had been looking for, it undoubtedly meant that he had discovered the way to achieve a breakthrough. How could this not make Yu Xing'an happy? Once he achieved a breakthrough, Sima Jinkai would most definitely be a peerless expert in the future. "When are you leaving?" asked Yu Xing'an. He did not attempt to make Sima Jinkai stay. For one, he did not have such intentions in the first place. On the other hand, if this person had made up his mind, nobody could deter him from doing what he wanted to do. "I'm leaving immediately. So, I've come to ask you. Where's he at?" "I'm sure you know, sir." Sima Jinkai asked anxiously. Yes, he had had a breakthrough. During the battle, after enduring Tang Wulin's final attack, he had taken a step which he had not been able to for the past 10 years. At that moment, he had reached the rank of a title dolor. He felt his own sublimation and a substantial improvement in himself. Sadly, the great achievement was only inside the Star-Do Battle Network, and after he left it, everything vanished. His soul power had returned to its initial rank. However, after experiencing the sensation of being a title Doluor for only a brief moment, one could imagine his newfound passion. Yu Jing'an did not give him a direct answer. Instead, he posed another question: "So, will you be coming back?" Sima Jinkai was slightly stunned. He scratched his head. "I'm afraid that I won't. According to the strange feeling I had when my saber soul awakened, it seems that I have no choice but to remain with this man after I find him." Yu Jing'an did not disguise the disappointment in his eyes. Although Sima Jinkai was wild and intractable, his strength in combat was extremely powerful. In the army, he was always a beacon of morale. If such an incredible warrior left his army just like that, he could not help but feel a little heartache. However, this only lasted for a very short while. Yu Jing'an nodded and said, "Zheng Yu will be meeting up with you guys in the future. Do look after him for me." "Don't worry, sir." Sima Jinkai thumped his firm chest. A faint smile appeared at the edge of Yu Jing'an's lips. "Then go. He's in the Blood God Army." "Blood God Army? Where's that?" Sima Jinkai honestly had no knowledge of this federal secret. Yu Jingyu told him the Blood God Army's location in a simple way. "I never knew that there's such an amazing place. It'd be great if I can fight with the abyssal creatures. I'm sure I'll have the time of my life there. I'll be off then. Goodbye, General." As he said this, he gave Yu Jing'an another military salute. Yu Jing'an nodded and said, "There are many experts in the Blood God Army, especially their commander, the Bright Mirror Doluor, Zhong Huanyun. His strength is extraordinary. After you've achieved a breakthrough in your cultivation base, it wouldn't hurt to go and spar with him. It'd most certainly be of great help to your elevation." "Oh, that's great. The Bright Mirror Doluor, Zhong Huanyun. I'll remember that. Thank you, General." Yu Jing'an watched as Sima Jinkai left in great strides. Feeling somewhat abandoned, the corners of his lips twitched slightly. "Zhong Huanyun, man, the place will be quite lively after this." Ha ha. When he woke up from his meditation, it was already early morning the next day. Tang Wulin heaved a sigh. He clearly felt he had improved even more. A saber soul, huh? If he didn't have a saber soul, he wouldn't be a match for me. But with it, that Gale Saber Demon Sima Jinkai really suppressed my abilities. In any case, what was with his dragon-slaying saber? Even if that dragon-slaying saber was of exceptional quality, how did it manage to nullify his golden dragon spear's powers after head-on collisions? It seemed to have even devoured some of his golden dragon spear's energy. Recalling his fight and thinking it through, Tang Wulin could almost be certain that Sima Jinkai had been assisted by his golden dragon spear's power when he achieved a breakthrough during the battle. What was the relationship between the dragon-slaying saber and the golden dragon spear? This was his first time experiencing such a peculiar match. Without a doubt, the two were very closely related. However, this closeness was something Tang Wulin had never felt before. Clearly, his golden dragon spear was a divine tool that had been hidden in his bloodline all this while. There was no need to question its effects. Tang Wulin had personally confirmed the might of the dragon-slaying saber. It seemed to be able to call upon the powers of the evil dragons it slew in the past, perhaps the distant past, or maybe in some mystic lands, and then it could erupt with extremely terrifying force. His golden dragon spear would not be suppressed by his dragon-slaying saber. On the contrary, after the two weapons collided, the impact did not harm him or the Gale Saber Demon Sima Jinkai. The feeling was something like two acquaintances sparring with each other. However, from the damage the impact's shockwave had done to their battle armors, the terrifying power they released was evident. Even Stardow Battle Network could not handle it. Were they companions? If the dragon-slaying saber was also a divine tool which had been turned into a martial soul for Sima Jinkai to use, then would that not make it the same as his golden dragon spear? Unfortunately, he could not leave the Blood God Army. If that was not the case, he would have liked to find the Gale Saber Demon Sima Jinkai and ask him a few questions of his own. At the same time, he would also like to experience just how powerful this dragon-slaying saber's aura really was in person. How could he have known that the Gale Saber demon Sima Jinkai was already on his way, heading straight for the Blood God army? Yu Jingyu was in secluded meditation while Xu Xiaoyan was off somewhere searching for her own path. Nobody could have notified him of this. He had 3 more matches after this. From his battle with the Gale Saber demon Sima Jinkai, he could see that the upcoming matches would be extremely difficult. This was especially true for the mecha battle which was about to start. He had to fight with all he had. He had already made it this far in the competition. He could not afford to lose, no matter what. What Tang Wulin did not know was that due to his victory over the Gale Saber demon Sima Jinkai, the entire Blood God army was in a celebratory mood. Nobody questioned his being a major general at such a young age anymore. There was only a single thought in everyone's minds, and it was that they had the most powerful expert below the rank of a title d'honneur. If Tang Wulin could obtain victory in the finals, he would be representing the Blood God army as he climbed to the pinnacle of strength. Unfortunately, although they had been waiting in the resting area and the area surrounding the Blood God army hoping to get a look at this major general who was at least the runner-up in the Federal Star Do Battle Network Challenge while representing the Blood God army, they were unable to catch a glimpse of this person. The semifinals of the mecha battles had started under such circumstances. Tang Wulin picked his mecha. Entering the competition grounds with purposeful steps, spear in hand, he was shocked to notice that the volume of the cheering was clearly softer compared to the solo competitions, even though this was also the semifinals. The stadium only sounded slightly noisy. There was no sense of warmth or passion. He had been immersing himself in the battle with the Gale Saber demon. Naturally, he did not know that the entire Star Do Battle Network almost broke down after their battle. The venue of the semi-final matches was destroyed, and the spectators were also affected. There were many who died or were injured. Although nobody could actually die within the Star Do Battle Network, the pain that they had to endure would be similar. It was akin to their experience in the Spirit Ascension platform. Hence, the Star Do Battle Network had experienced the greatest threat to its existence ever since it came into being. A plethora of complaints filled the entire battle network. This had also darkened the year's competition a bit. The federal government was quick to act. They came out with a statement immediately. They also explained that the battle between the Golden Dragon King and the Gale Saber Demon had indeed exceeded the attacking power of ordinary 3-word battle armor masters. That was how such an incident came to happen. They refunded the ticket fares for every spectator and even gave them a fair bit of compensation. At the same time, they also announced that they would further strengthen the periphery of the competition stage for the Mecha Battles semifinals and finals, and the Soul Masters Battles finals. After a whole day, they somehow managed to settle this affair. However, that battle had still had a traumatic effect on some of the spectators. Hence, in today's Mecha Battles semifinals, although the spectators were very interested in observing the match, their hearts were also hammering. Would what happened in the Soul Masters battle happen again? After all, nobody would like to suddenly experience the sensation of dying. Hence, the level of passion the spectators had, naturally, dampened greatly. However, when Tang Wulin and his opponent stepped into the arena, the spectators' emotions were still gradually aroused. After all, this was a collision between 2 experts. This match would decide who would be able to make it into the finals. As he looked at his opponent in the distance, Tang Wulin recalled this contestant's information. Without a doubt, ever since he made it into the top 8, the odds of every opponent would be better than his. This was also the case for his current one. Tang Wulin's opponent in the semifinals was regarded as the oddest contestant in the year's Mecha Battle Tournament. It was not because he operated his mecha in an unusual manner. It was because this contestant's combat strength did not originate from his mecha, but his martial soul. His moniker was the Bubble King. He was the only contestant to not equip his mecha with any weapons. Instead, he picked another set of thrusters and fixed it onto his mecha to increase his mecha's strength. There were also mecha masters who did this in real life. Only the mecha masters who were extremely confident in their own martial soul would do that. It was quite astonishing for such a mecha to be able to enter the semifinals. The might of his martial soul could only be imagined. This video will end here. Like video and subscribe to my channel.